here is a good picture of the table. Here we are. So I'm going to see what I can do. Good. This is not getting pixelated. Look how beautifully this is done. And I told you, this is such a lovely description of what we were reading yesterday, Rashi. And you can see the posts, and you can see these pins here. Yeah, I have to thank Janet. This is from Janet's book. But these are, the ksatav and the other pieces that Rashi, here he says, right? The ksatot are the supports, and the menachot are the tubes. And of course, there's also the opposite. So I imagine this is what he means by the the supports. Now, in the book that I own, this actually goes the entire length between the two. So there's a pair here and a pair here. You follow me? They're these, that's what he's describing as these hollow canes as well, these split canes. But this, I suspect, is what he's maybe saying too. I'm not sure. But it's, in the fact that we have to do things in that way, in other words, we've got descriptions and we don't have pictures, just makes it very interesting as far as trying to get a good picture, a clear picture of what's going on. I'm going to go back to our text.
I forgot, what were the small little tabs? What are they for?
So, as I said in the book that I have, what are represented by tabs there are actually, I think, the split canes that go from one side to another. And again, if I had my book, I would show you that they would hold up the golden plates. There were these golden plates that sat on the canes or on the tabs, and that actually the bread was placed in those golden.
Got it.
Plates. They were rectangular plates that were slightly bent at each end, depending on, again, who you're looking at and who's doing the illustrations.
So like a baker's rack then, right? What you see where bakers, yep, exactly. Okay, that's what I thought, but I wasn't sure. Okay, thank you.
Of course. And the good news is, when we get to the end of this, we actually repeat about the actual construction of the tabernacle. What we're reading right now are the instructions regarding the construction of the tabernacle. But when we get to the last two parshiot of Exodus, of Vayakhel and Pekudei, we actually read of the construction itself. And so I'll have a chance, God willing, I will get the book and see what I can do to make sure I make pictures from that book to show you the various things. So we have to go up a little bit. Yeah, here we are. This is right. Lechem panim. So we had this sentence yesterday. V'natata al hashulchan, you shall place on the table lechem panim, lechem bread, panim of faces, lefanai, before me. Tamid, constantly. It should be there constantly. So lecha panim, he says, sheyesh lo panim, which had faces, kamo shepi Rashi, as I've explained. Uminayin halechem, sorry. I think this is minyan. Minyan halechem means the number of loaves, the seder marachotav, and the order of its arrangement, mefurashim be'emor elakonim. That's actually specified, it's detailed out in Leviticus, in Parshat Emor. It's a parsha in Leviticus, in the book of Leviticus. So that is all about the table. That's what we read here in Parshat Truma about the table. And, I was trying to think again. I'm going to do some, if I have a chance, to look and see what significance it actually had. Give me a moment. Okay. Because I was thinking, why was the bread shaped the way it was with those two faces? And I wonder to myself whether it's talking about the fact that we need to be conscious of other people when we satisfy ourselves. I mean, this is a purely speculative interpretation on my part, but I realize that the fact that there's hunger in the world, that on some levels, there's no excuse. There's no reason why anyone should have to go hungry. I mean, I realize that if you deconstruct further, there are people who don't want to take care of themselves, perhaps reject the idea of being taken care of, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm wondering to myself if that the fact that the bread is, in a sense, the sides of the loaf are looking at each other, that we don't just satisfy ourselves, that we have to make sure that others are satisfied and conscious of the privileges that we have in being fed. There is a beautiful, beautiful midrash that says that sustaining the world with food is more difficult for God, if you could say anything is difficult for God, but in comparison to the crossing of the Red Sea, the miracle of the Red Sea, that seeing that people are sustained sufficiently every day is a far greater miracle than the crossing of the Red Sea. And I think there's a lot to be said in that particular statement. To back up again as we sort of move on to the next piece of furniture, remember this table represented royalty. I'd like to reiterate the point that I was making about the idea of royalty and what that stands for. I think part of the idea of royalty was that it concentrated the pride, if you want to call it that, of the nation in one institution, but at the very same time, the need for royalty to make sure that they were there for the sustaining of the community, that there has to be that element of it as well. It's not just simply self-serving. If anybody would like to comment, I will stop the share just briefly in case there are any further comments before we move on. So does anybody want to say anything about this or have any further questions about this? Otherwise, we will move on. All right. We will move on. Yeah, Janet.
I thought that the sides that you see were the face, the nose and the mouth, and the horns, of course, are on top, but they're flattened.
I'm not sure what you're referring to. I was thinking of the menorah as representing the face.
No, I mean the bread, you said it was the face.
Right.
So it's like when you look at it on the side, as you see it in the pictures, kind of have a nose and a mouth.
Okay, let me go back here and see if I can find. Okay, so this is, let me get this picture up, and I'll share that particular picture. Give me a second here. So this is according to one example of the bread. So is this where you're saying the nose and the mouth here?
Yeah.
So that's this particular picture. I had not, until you showed me this picture from your book, this is not the way it's depicted in Moshe Cohen's book. His book, the bread is thinner, and not only that, you see these angles here where these are angled, the pan. So in Moshe Cohen's book, these sides are actually angled out at like 45 degrees. Visualize that. And these are the faces. In other words, there's a mold in which this is done. This is probably, he's trying to show you the actual shape of the bread. That is not the way Moshe Cohen describes it. And the faces are simply these two sides here. So tell me, Janet, where are you? Help me here. So you said this is supposed to be a face? My sense is that it's called faces because these two sides are facing each other. And you could say that about this too. That in some ways, I mean, the interpretation you might give of this is that in some ways it is a representation, a very stylistic representation of the cherubim on the ark that are on the ark cover, where these are their wings that are facing each other, and this would be the ark cover here. I mean, I've never seen this particular illustration before, but that would be interesting. that there's a certain mirror there, and that just as God sustains the world, human royalty is also responsible in imitating God in a sense. So, but beyond that, I only was thinking of the menorah as representing, of course, the human face. But it's all out there. So let's just go in here. I'll go see if I can go back to the screen share. And we can start. Was any other questions or comments before we move on? Yes, Harlan? Harlan, you'll need to unmute. Go ahead.
I was wondering what the bowls and the ladles and the jars and the jugs were used for, the utensils on the bread position.
Yeah. Well, I know that they used to pour some frankincense on it. They also had to remove the bread. They had to use a utensil to remove the bread. I would imagine to myself that they wouldn't just take their hands and take the bread off. I had mentioned that there was a tradition that for one, the bread was on that table from one Shabbos to the next. It was on for a week. And when they removed, I imagine to myself, although I'm sure there's definitive information regarding that possibly, did it stay on through Shabbat and then it was removed at the end of Shabbat and the new series of loaves were placed on for the next week? That would certainly make sense on one level. But the story goes that at the end of the week, when the bread was removed, it was just as fresh as when it was originally put on. That there was that miracle associated with the showbread, that it was just as fresh.
Frankincense is a preservative.
Interesting. Okay. Well,
Preservative? Frankincense?
Okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I don't know, but maybe it was. I don't know.
Let's put it this way. I mean, I think what we are supposed to understand is that nothing happens without God making it possible. That's one of the things I liked about Ohio, that the motto of the state of Ohio is, with God, everything is possible. So
That's true.
So,
the priests ate the bread only, not the Israelis.
Israelites, yeah, no, I would not think that Israelites would be allowed to consume it. There were 24 watches of priests. So there were priests at that point where each family would serve in the temple for 1 week. And then in the course of the year, of course, each family would serve twice for the week. And they were known as watches. And so I'm sure it would be the watch that would have the opportunity to eat from the bread, the priests that were on that particular watch. But there were 24 priestly families.
Oh.
Yeah. All right, we'll go on back to the. All right, we'll give this a shot here. So here we go with what I have to tell you, one of the most difficult to interpret parts, and that's the menorah. So I'm sort of grateful that I will have a picture next time. So the asita menorat zahav tahor. You shall make a menorah, a candlestick of pure gold. Miksha te'aseh hamenorah. The candlestick should be made, te'aseh. It's a passive form of the verb. Miksha, beaten. In other words, you have to beat the gold and beat the shape out of the gold. So miksha has to do with beating the gold. Yerecha, I believe, means it's like central post. The kana, I believe that means it's branches. Givi'eha, it's cups. Kaftoreha, Well, literally in modern Hebrew, the word a kaftor is a button. But we know if you have any visualization of the menorah, you know that there were parts of the menorah that were rounded. And so it's a word to describe those spherical parts of the menorah. It's
The menorah was made in one piece.
correct, all beaten out of one solid piece of gold, right? And this is what's going to be said here, right? It's literally pracheha, I believe means it's flowers, right? They were, I believe, embossed on it, beaten out, taken from the metal, these pictures of almond blossoms, something like that. Mimena yihiyeh, it shall all be from it. And I think from it here means from that one block of gold. So let's take a look at Rashi on this. Fine. Oh, here we go. A lot of Rashi. Look at this. We'll do the best we can. Miksha te'aseh menorah. Here we go. Shelo ya'asena chuliyot. That you shouldn't make it out of parts. Velo ya'aseh kaneha, and should not make its, we said that the kaneha is the branches, the nerotea and its lamps, evarim, in different pieces, v'acharkach, and after they are all made individually, yad became, that he should attach them. Kederech hatzorfin, just in the manner of those artisans, shekorim, and they talk about this as being soldire, which sounds like to solder. And he says Delightung is the Yiddish for that. So I don't know the Yiddish. I know solder better than I know Leitung in Yiddish, but I have to imagine it all has to do with attaching metal to metal. Ela kula, however, kula ba'a metchila. It all has to come from originally, this is, I was having difficulty reading the Hebrew here, michaticha achat. It all comes from one piece, umakish bekurnas, and he beats with a mallet, vechotech bechli ha'omanot, and he cuts it out with utensils of the artisan, umafrid hakanim elach vel elach, and in this way he separates out the branches from one side and the other side. Miksha, beaten. Targumo, nagid. Okay, the Aramaic here is nagid. Here's the word in the Targum itself up here. Okay. He says lashon hamshacha. So interesting, it says, is that the Aramaic says that where it says miksha at the end, understood as sort of a pulling out, drawing out, shem mamshich et ha'evarim min ha'eshet, because he draws out, he pulls out the limbs from the block, the kan ulakan, from one side to the other side, bahakashat hakurnas, with the beating of the mallet. Ulashon miksha, and he said, however, he says that the word miksha itself, the term miksha, makat purnas is actually got to do with the beating of the mallet. And here we go, bade or bat de, balas. So the Middle French is this. Lauren, you may have a better pronunciation of this word. Do you have it handy? Can you shout it out?
It says Batediz, so I would pronounce that bat D.
Yeah. So it sounds like beaten, doesn't it? And that's in the medieval French. And I can understand, believe me, and you will too, the Yiddish, which is gehemmert, hammered, right? and he quotes Daniel, the book of Daniel, chapter 5. It says, Da Leda Nakshan. So the book of Daniel, there's a great deal of the book of Daniel that is actually written in Aramaic. There are 2 books in the Bible that contain Aramaic, and one of them is the book of Daniel, as I just mentioned, and the other is the book of Ezra. They're both, otherwise the Bible is written in Hebrew, but there is, as I said, these 2 books, later books, that have a lot of Aramaic in them. And in some ways, I think they're representative of having been written in that first exile. So one knocking one to the other, they're knocking against each other. That's what the Daniel part is. Te'aseh hamenorah, the candlestick should be made, right? It's the passive voice. And so this is, okay, me eleha, automatically, really. Lefi, and in other words, that the guy was just beating against it and this was coming out automatically. Lefi, because, and this is from the Tanchuma, Shahaya Moshe Mitkasheba, because Moses had difficulty understanding how this was actually to be made. So I'll keep going just a little bit more. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, said to Moses, Hashlech et hakikar la'ur, throw, just cast the talent of gold into the fire, vehi ne'eseit me'eleha, and it will be made by itself, automatically. L'chach lo nichtav ta'aseh, and that's why the Hebrew doesn't say in the active voice, you shall make, but it says shall be made. And that's from Menachot Kaftet, from the tractate Menachot. So what I'm thinking is that this actually would be a good place to start, God willing, next year. And let me take this. That works. Yes, it did. And this is going to be down at the bottom here somewhere, but I'm going to paste it. And woo, sorry. And I'll move this up to here. And we'll start at Shlishi next year, God willing. And I will stop the share and stop. Okay, and we'll stop the recording and make Kaddish de Rabbanan.
I have a question.